Augustine stormed into the dimly lit room, his face twisted with anger. His pregnant wife, Justina, sat on the edge of their bed, her hands gently cradling her swollen belly. She looked up at him with a mix of fear and confusion. He glared at her, his voice cold and commanding. "Justina, as you're preparing for this child's delivery, you'd better pray hard, that this baby is a boy. If it's not, don't bother coming back to this house." Justina froze, her heart pounding as the weight of his words sank in. Tears welled up in her eyes, spilling onto her cheeks as she nodded weakly. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "This child will be a boy." Augustine smirked, seemingly satisfied with her response. Without another word, he turned on his heel and walked out of the room, leaving Justina alone with her racing thoughts and the heavy burden of his demand. As the door closed behind him, Justina let out a shaky breath, her tears falling freely now. She looked down at her unborn child, silently pleading, "Please, let it be a boy, for both our sakes." A few days later, Justina found herself lying on the hospital bed, her body weak but her mind racing. She had just woken up from a restless sleep, the faint beeping of medical monitors filling the room. The door creaked open, and a cheerful nurse walked in, holding a clipboard and wearing a warm smile. "Congratulations, madam," the nurse said, her voice full of enthusiasm. Justina's heart skipped a beat. She sat up slightly, her voice trembling as she asked, "Is my child a boy?" The nurse's smile grew wider. "No, madam," she replied, practically beaming. "But you've received double blessings, to beautiful baby girls." Justina's eyes widened in shock. "Two girls?" She whispered, her voice barely audible. "Not even one boy?" Suddenly, her emotions overwhelmed her, and tears began streaming down her face. She covered her mouth, sobbing uncontrollably as the weight of Augustine's words came crashing down on her. The nurse, startled by Justina's reaction, quickly moved closer. "Oh, madam, please don't cry," she said, her tone soft and reassuring. "Your daughters are healthy and perfect. They're a gift." But no matter how much the nurse tried to console her, Justina couldn't stop crying. The joy of motherhood was overshadowed by a deep fear. What would Augustine say? What would he do? 2 days later, Justina sat in the back seat of a taxi, cradling her twin daughters as the vehicle made its way toward her home. The newborns slept peacefully, their tiny faces nestled in soft blankets. As the car approached a bustling shopping mall, Justina leaned forward and spoke to the driver. The driver nodded and pulled into the parking lot. "Take your time, madam," he said, watching as Justina carefully stepped out of the car. She cast a quick glance at her sleeping babies, reassured by their calmness, and disappeared into the mall. Time passed, and the driver remained seated in the car, occasionally glancing back at the twins to ensure they were safe. Boredom began to creep in as the minutes turned into an hour. He leaned his head back against the seat and soon drifted off to sleep. A sharp, piercing cry jolted him awake. One of the twins was wailing loudly. The driver glanced at the dashboard clock. It was almost nightfall. A sense of unease gripped him as he realized that Justina had been gone far too long. Alarmed, the driver quickly got out of the car and hurried toward the shopping mall. At the entrance, he approached a security guard stationed by the door. "Excuse me, sir," he began, his voice urgent. "The woman I brought here, she went inside hours ago and hasn't returned. I have her newborns in the car, but I can't find her." The security guard frowned, his expression shifting to concern. "Describe her to me," he said. After hearing the description, the guard gestured toward the bustling interior of the mall. "You'll need to check inside. Look through the crowd and see if you can spot her." The driver nodded and entered the mall, his eyes scanning the sea of shoppers. He wove through the aisles, searching every corner, but there was no sign of Justina. Anxiety mounted with each passing minute. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. The driver's eyes narrowed as different fearful thoughts ran through his mind. "This might be serious," the guard muttered. "Let's check the security footage." The driver nodded, his heart pounding, as they headed toward the security office, desperate to uncover what had happened to Justina. When there was no trace of Justina, the driver walked out of the security room confused and uncertain about what to do, decided to take the newborn twins to someone he trusted. He drove through winding streets until he reached a modest house belonging to an elderly woman who ran a small daycare from her home. The old woman, known in the community as Mama Grace, opened the door with a kind smile. She listened attentively as the driver explained the situation, her brow furrowing with concern. "These poor children have been abandoned, Mama Grace. Their mother went into the mall and never returned. I don't know what else to do," he said, his voice heavy with worrying. Mama Grace's expression softened as she looked at the sleeping babies. "You did the right thing bringing them here," she said gently, taking the twins into her arms. "I'll report this to the police first thing tomorrow and ensure they're cared for in the meantime." True to her word, Mama Grace contacted the authorities and shared the details of the incident. While the investigation began, she took it upon herself to nurture the newborns, feeding them, singing to them, and ensuring they felt safe and loved. A few days later, a young couple visited Mama Grace's daycare. They were well dressed and spoke with warmth and excitement as they explained their intentions. "We've been longing to adopt a child," the husband said, holding his wife's hand. "We've heard about the amazing work you do here, and we thought you might be able to help us." Mama Grace smiled warmly. "I do have children here, but most of them are older. Are you looking for a specific age?" The wife leaned forward eagerly. "We'd prefer a younger child, if possible." Mama Grace hesitated, then said, "I don't have any very young children except for a set of twin baby girls who were recently brought to me under unusual circumstances." Mama Grace's smile faded slightly, and her expression turned serious. "The girls are still very tender," she said cautiously. "I want to monitor them for a while longer to ensure they're strong enough to adapt to a new environment." The wife placed a hand over her heart, her voice earnest. "Please trust us, Mama Grace. We will protect and care for them as if they were our own flesh and blood." The husband nodded in agreement, his expression sincere. Mama Grace studied the couple closely, her wise eyes searching for any sign of doubt or insincerity. Finally, she nodded. "I'll approve this on one condition. You must bring the girls to visit me once every 3 months, so I can see how they're doing." The couple smiled brightly, their relief evident. "Of course, Mama Grace, we promise," the husband said firmly. With a thoughtful look, Mama Grace handed the babies over to the couple, her heart both heavy and hopeful. She whispered a silent prayer, hoping the twins would find the love and happiness they deserved in their new home. Desmond and Angela were overjoyed as they arrived home with their 2 new daughters. Desmond, his face glowing with pride, gently held one of the babies in his arms. "As a new father," he said with a smile, "I've decided to name our beautiful daughters Linda and Laura." Angela beamed and nodded in agreement. "Thank you so much, Desmond. You've made my dream of becoming a mother come true." She hesitated for a moment, then added softly, "I still believe that after my treatments, I'll be able to give birth to your own flesh and blood." Desmond reached for her hand and pulled her close, his voice full of love and reassurance. "Angela, we are already parents. Linda and Laura are ours, and I love you so much, don't doubt it for a second." Together, they cradled the twins, their hearts filled with hope and happiness as they imagined the future. 7 years later, Linda and Laura came bounding through the front door after school, their faces bright with excitement. They rushed to their mother, Angela, and wrapped their arms around her. Angela smiled warmly at them and said, "My lovely children, how are you today?" "School was fine, but we missed you so much," they chimed in unison. Linda pulled back slightly and frowned. "I wasn't happy that you didn't come to pick us up today, Mom. I hate riding with the driver." Laura nodded in agreement. "The driver said you were feeling weak. Are you okay, Mom?" Angela laughed softly as she pulled them to herself, hiding the fatigue she felt. "I'm fine, my darlings. I promise I'll try to drive you to school tomorrow." The twins squealed with delight and hugged her tightly. "Mom, you're the best," they chorused. Angela kissed their foreheads and said lovingly, "I love you both so much. Now go change into something comfortable, and then we'll have some playtime." A few weeks later, Angela's pregnancy had progressed, and her growing belly was evident. She sat in the living room, sipping water, when Linda and Laura returned from school. Linda immediately approached her, her face clouded with worrying. "Mom, you didn't come again today," she said, her voice tinged with frustration. "I hope you're okay." Angela's mood shifted suddenly, her exhaustion boiling over into anger. "What do you expect us to do for you girls? There's always something you're complaining about." Linda's eyes widened in shock. "But, Mom, I don't like riding with the driver. I want you, or Dad, to drive us to school." Angela snapped, her voice rising. "Keep quiet, you ungrateful child. Do you even understand the sacrifices we make to ensure you're comfortable? Do you think it's easy?" Laura, startled by her mother's outburst, stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Mom, why are you shouting at us? I'll tell Dad when he gets home." Angela glared at her but said nothing more. The tension in the room was palpable. That day marked the beginning of a rift in the family. When Desmond returned home that evening, Linda and Laura ran to him, recounting the incident with teary eyes. Concerned, Desmond approached Angela, who sat quietly in one of their sitting room. "Angela," he began gently, "you're under a lot of stress, and I understand that. But you must remember, Linda and Laura only know you as their mother. Just because you're having a biological child soon doesn't make them any less part of this family." Angela looked at him, tears brimming in her eyes. "I love them, Desmond, but I'm scared. I need to ensure that my baby has no one to compete with." Desmond took her hands in his and said firmly, "Laura and Linda are our first children. They are our daughters, and they need your love now more than ever. A new baby won't change that." Though Angela nodded, but the unease evident on her face. A few years later, Laura and Linda were 10 years old, while Angela's biological daughter, Agatha, was now a bubbly 2-year-old. That afternoon, as school ended, the 3 children waited in the schoolyard for their mother or the family driver to pick them up. Laura and Linda stood in a quiet corner, deliberately keeping their distance from Agatha, who was playing nearby. "I don't understand why Mom treats us this way," Linda whispered, glancing around to make sure no one could overhear. "She's so harsh, always flogging us and finding reasons to punish us, especially when Dad isn't around." Laura sighed, her voice tinged with frustration. "She even says things like, 'You don't belong here.' It hurts so much, Linda." "Then where do we belong? Why would she give birth to us when she knew she wasn't ready for motherhood?" As the sisters were lost in their conversation, the sound of car engines snapped them out of their thoughts. 2 vehicles pulled into the school compound, a taxi and Angela's sleek car. Agatha was the first to spot her mother and squealed with excitement. "Mom!" she cried, running toward Angela as Laura and Linda followed behind. "Mom, you're so late today," Laura said, her tone slightly annoyed. "What kept you?" Angela smiled faintly, brushing off the question. "You'll be riding in that taxi today," she said, pointing toward the waiting vehicle. "Agatha and I have somewhere to be." Laura frowned. "But, Mom, you should have sent the driver to pick us up in another car. I hate riding with strangers." Before Laura could say more, Linda squeezed her hand gently and whispered, "Let's just go with what Mum says. Don't make it worse." Reluctantly, Laura nodded, and the twins climbed into the taxi. Angela handed the driver their school bags, giving him quick instructions in a low voice before driving off with Agatha. The taxi driver started the engine, and the motion of the car quickly lulled Laura and Linda to sleep. They didn't notice the long, winding route the driver took and the hours that passed. By the time the car stopped, the sun was setting, casting an eerie glow over the surroundings. The driver carefully changed their clothes and carried the sleeping girls out of the car and laid them on a patch of grass beside a deserted road near a thick bush. Beside them, he placed the suitcase containing their clothes and the sealed envelope. Without a word, he got back into the car, started the engine, and sped away, leaving the girls behind in the growing darkness. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves, and the faint chirping of crickets filled the air. The twins remained asleep, oblivious to the strange environment. Back at Angela's home, she reclined on the living room sofa, with a smug smile on her face, her phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was light and full of satisfaction as she spoke. "I finally got rid of those abandoned twins," Angela said, laughing softly. "It's such a relief, Amelia. I feel like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders. I can finally have my peace." On the other end of the call, Amelia chuckled. "I told you, Angela, you've been too soft for too long. It's about time you prioritized your own life and your real children. Those girls didn't belong in your home. This is the best decision you could have made." Angela leaned back further, her voice carrying a mix of confidence and amusement. "You're absolutely right. They were just a constant reminder of Desmond's ridiculous decision to adopt them. Now, with them gone, I can focus entirely on Agatha and the other babies I will have. They deserve my full attention." There was a brief pause before Amelia asked, "What about Desmond? How did he react to all this?" Angela smirked, twirling a strand of her hair between her fingers. "Oh, that's the best part. Desmond is completely clueless. He left for that professional course overseas last week. It'll keep him out of the country for 7 years. By the time he comes back, Laura and Linda will be nothing but a distant memory." Amelia clapped her hands in excitement, her voice gleeful. "Oh, Angela, this is perfect, just perfect. With Desmond gone, no one can question your decision. You've secured a bright, peaceful future for your family." Angela grinned, her tone dripping with self-satisfaction. "Exactly. I have nothing to worry about now. Those girls are gone for good, and Agatha will have everything she deserves without competition." The two women laughed together, their voices echoing through the room. After what felt like an eternity, Laura stirred awake. She sat up slowly, rubbing her eyes, only to realize that she wasn't in her bed, or anywhere familiar. Her heart raced as she took in her surroundings: tall, looming trees, thick bushes, and the faint sound of rustling leaves. Panic set in as she noticed her twin sister, Linda, still sleeping beside her. "Linda," Laura shook her gently, her voice trembling. "Wake up, wake up." Linda's eyes fluttered open, and she looked around in confusion. "What? Where are we?" she asked, her voice laced with fear. She sat up abruptly, clutching Laura's hand tightly. "How did we get here? Where's Mom? Where's Dad?" The twins stared at each other, their fear growing by the second. Suddenly, Linda's gaze fell on a folded piece of paper, placed neatly on top of their luggage bags, lying a few feet away. Her voice quivered as she said, "Laura, look. There's a letter. And our bags. Who left them here? What's going on?" Laura hesitated before reaching for the letter. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it and began to read in a low voice to herself. As the words sank in, tears streamed down her face. She could barely finish before her voice broke. "What does it say?" Linda asked anxiously, snatching the letter from Laura's hands. Her eyes scanned the words, widening in disbelief, as she read it aloud.
Laura and Linda. By the time you read this, you will be far away from the place you once called home. It's time you know the truth. My husband and I are not your biological parents. You were abandoned by your real mother. Left in a taxi and later brought to an old woman who ran a daycare. We adopted you when I was unable to bear children, but now I can no longer bear the thought of you competing for affection with my own daughter. This is goodbye. I leave you to your fate. Your fake mom."
Linda's hands shook as she finished reading. Her lips quivered, and she looked at Laura with tear-filled eyes. She abandoned us, Mom. No, she was never really our mom." Laura sobbed uncontrollably, pulling Linda into a tight embrace. "What did we do wrong?" she cried. "So, we didn't have parents. Are we orphans? Or what really happened to us? Where are we from?" The twins clung to each other, their tears soaking into each other's clothes. The world felt cold and cruel, the weight of the letter crushing their young hearts. After what felt like hours, Linda wiped her tears and said shakily, We can't stay here. We have to find somewhere safe." Laura nodded, though fear gripped her chest. "But where will we go? What will we do?" Linda stood and picked up her small luggage bag. "We'll just keep walking. Someone will help us, they have to." Laura hesitated, but eventually grabbed her bag as well. Hand in hand, the twins began walking down the deserted road, their small figures illuminated by the faint light of the moon. Each step was heavy with uncertainty and fear. The sound of their footsteps echoed in the quiet night as the road stretched endlessly before them, leading to an unknown future. Laura and Linda finally stumbled into a small town. Tired and hungry, they noticed some houses and decided to rest on the veranda of one. As they sat down, exhausted, a woman stepped out of the house and spotted them. "Who are you looking for?" the woman asked, her voice sharp as she approached. Laura quickly stood up and said, "We don't know anyone here. We're strangers. Please, Mum, we need somewhere to sleep for the night. Please help us." "You can't stay here. Leave right now, before I pour you hot water," the woman sneered. Shaken, Laura and Linda quickly got up and left without saying another word. After walking a little further, they saw another house. Too tired to keep moving, they sat on the veranda and leaned against each other. Within moments, they drifted off into a deep sleep. At dawn, the owner of the house, an elderly man with a kind face, stepped outside. He was startled to see two young girls sleeping soundly on his veranda. Gently nudging them awake, he asked, "Who are you? And what are you doing here? Where are your parents?" Laura's eyes filled with tears, and she began to sob. "We don't have parents," she said between sniffles. "Please, sir, help us. We don't have anywhere to go." Linda, wiping her tears, added, "Uncle, please let us stay with you. We won't cause any trouble." The old man looked at them, his heart softening as he saw their worn-out faces and tear-streaked cheeks. "You can't just wander into someone's house and ask to stay," he said gently. "I need to know how you've been surviving and what brought you here before I can decide to help." The girls nodded quietly, their small hands still clasped together. They were ready to tell their story, hoping this kind man would give them the shelter they desperately needed. In just 4 days, Linda and Laura had settled into their new life with Uncle Jeffrey. Early each morning, one of them would sweep the compound, while the other washed Jeffrey's piled-up clothes. Every evening, they took turns fetching water from the neighborhood's running taps, learning the routines of their new home. One afternoon, as they finished their chores, Jeffrey approached them with a concerned look on his face. "Girls," he said, "we've run out of food. There's nothing left for us to eat today, unless my sister's daughter remembers to bring me some food supplies." Laura's eyes widened with worrying, and she quickly asked, "Uncle, when will she come? I'm already so hungry." Linda, who had been folding some clothes, added, "The last time you sent me to buy things at the shop near the junction, the shopkeeper asked if I could become her sales girl, since we're not going to school right now." Jeffrey frowned and shook his head firmly. "No, Linda, I won't allow you to work as a sales girl. Don't listen to her. We'll find a way to manage without that, don't worry." Laura sighed deeply, clutching her stomach. "But Uncle, I'm really hungry. What are we going to eat? We don't even know when your niece will come with the food." Jeffrey's face softened as he looked at the two girls. He gently placed a hand on each of their shoulders and said, "Don't worry, my daughters. We'll be fine. There's always a way out, even in tough times. Just trust me." Though the hunger gnawed at them, the warmth of Jeffrey's reassurance gave them a small glimmer of hope. A few days later, Laura and Linda began helping out by selling groundnuts and bread on the streets. With trays balanced carefully on their heads, they walked through the neighborhood, calling out to attract customers. Meanwhile, Uncle Jeffrey was at home, pacing back and forth, anxiously waiting for the girls to return. He couldn't sit still, worried about their safety. After a few hours, the girls finally arrived home, their trays completely empty. They looked tired but happy. Jeffrey's eyes widened with surprise as he saw the empty trays. "Well, you sold everything?" he asked, his voice filled with amazement. "Thank you so much, my daughters. I've been so restless since you left." Laura smiled as she handed him the money they made. "Yes, Uncle, we sold everything. It wasn't so bad. Hawking seems easier than I thought." Jeffrey shook his head and sighed. "You girls have done well. But this is not the life I want for you. Don't worry, things will get better. We'll all be fine." One morning, Laura woke up looking upset. She sat quietly, her face filled with sadness, refusing to speak. Linda noticed her sister's mood and tried everything she could to cheer her up, but nothing worked. Worried, Linda ran to Uncle Jeffrey. "Uncle, something is wrong with Laura. She's not happy, and she won't talk to me," Linda said, her voice trembling. Jeffrey frowned and immediately went to Laura's side. Sitting next to her, he gently asked, "Laura, what's wrong? Please talk to us." Laura finally spoke. "Uncle, I want to go back to school. I miss school so much," she cried. Jeffrey and Linda exchanged surprised looks, both shocked by her words. "School," Jeffrey said, his voice filled with concern. "But how can I possibly afford to send you to school? Where would I get that kind of money?" Linda placed a comforting hand on her uncle's arm. "Uncle, please don't stress yourself. You've already done so much for us." "I will talk to her," she said, trying to ease his worries. But Laura, still overwhelmed with emotion, stood up abruptly and walked out of the room without saying another word. Jeffrey sighed deeply, his heart heavy. "I wish I could send her to school, but I have no one to turn to for help. It pains me to see her like this," he said, his voice filled with sadness. Linda's eyes filled with tears as she replied, "Uncle, Laura has always been brilliant in school. I understand how much she misses it. Don't worry, I'll talk to her. I'll try to help her understand." As Jeffrey nodded, Linda wiped her tears, determined to find a way to comfort her sister no matter what. A few weeks later, while Laura and Linda were out hawking bread and groundnuts, Linda turned to her sister with a bright smile. "School is starting on Monday, and I'm so excited that you're going back. Remember, you're not just doing this for yourself, you're doing it for both of us," she said warmly. Laura smiled and nodded. "Thank you, Linda. I still can't believe you're putting your life on hold just for me. When you said you would keep hawking to pay my school fees and take care of me while I'm in school, I was completely stunned. You're sacrificing so much for me," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. Linda placed a reassuring hand on her sister's shoulder. "You're my blood, Laura. I'll do whatever it takes to see you succeed. Just promise me you'll make the most of this opportunity," she said with a determined look. Laura's eyes welled up as she replied, "I promise, Linda. I'll work hard, and I won't let you down. Thank you so much for everything. I'll never forget what you're doing for me." The two sisters shared a heartfelt moment, holding on to each other as they walked down the street, determined to overcome their challenges together. Back at Angela's house, Desmond was struggling to focus on his studies. He couldn't stop thinking about his twin girls, Laura and Linda. His mind was clouded with worrying, and it began to show. Noticing his distant look, his friend Mark walked over to him. "Hey, family man, you look homesick again. When are you going to grow up and focus?" Mark teased with a chuckle. Desmond shook his head and sighed. "I'm fine, Mark. It's just that it's been a while since I last spoke to my girls. Every time I call home, my wife always has an excuse for why I can't talk to them. It's really bothering me." Mark gave him a reassuring pat on the back. "Come on, Desmond. Your wife is taking care of things at home, so why not focus on your studies? You can't let this distract you." Desmond nodded slowly, but then admitted, "I know, but I've been having these strange, unpleasant dreams about my children and it's hard to shake off this feeling." Mark laughed, trying to lighten the mood. "Desmond, you're overthinking it. Dreams are just dreams. Now, let's get up and grab some lunch, nursing father." Desmond forced a smile, trying to push his worries aside, but deep down, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling about his daughters. 12 years later, Jeffrey and Linda were filled with immense joy as they attended Laura's graduation ceremony. Laura had achieved her dream of becoming a medical doctor, graduating with first-class honors. The crowd cheered as she received an award and a scholarship to study abroad, while tears of pride streamed down Linda's face. After the ceremony, Laura and Linda hugged tightly, their bond stronger than ever. Linda whispered, "Laura, you've made us so proud. Thank you for your endurance, focus, and commitment. You've shown us that dreams really do come true." Laura smiled and replied, "I couldn't have done it without you, and Uncle, you both gave me the strength to keep going." Shortly after, Laura traveling abroad to further her studies, while Linda continued her small-scale business. Laura excelled during her 2 years overseas, and when she returned, she came back not only as a more accomplished doctor, but also as a changed person, determined to give back to the people who had stood by her. One evening, Jeffrey, Linda, and Laura gathered in the modest sitting room of Jeffrey's home, reminiscing about their journey and sharing laughter. Suddenly, Laura's face turned serious to address them. "Uncle," she began, her voice filled with gratitude, "I want to take this opportunity to thank you for everything you've done for me and for us. When things got tough during my schooling, you sold your only 2 plots of land just to ensure I didn't drop out. You've been more than an uncle to me. You've been the father. that we didn't have. You gave me your name as my surname, and it has brought me so much honor. From today, you are no longer just our uncle. You are our father, and I'm proud to call you that. I graduated as Laura Giuffari, and that nothing can change." Geoffrey's eyes glistened with tears, his heart swelling with pride. Laura turned to Linda and took her hands. "Linda, my twin sister, my better half, you sacrificed so much for me. You put your own life on hold so I could achieve my dreams. You worked tirelessly, endured hardships, and never complained. Because of you, I am who I am today. I owe you everything, and I'll never forget what you did for me." Linda tried to speak, but her emotions overwhelmed her, and she could only nod as tears streamed down her face. Laura continued, her tone now full of excitement. "I have some news for both of you. I've been given a beautiful official apartment in the city where I work, and I want you both to come and live with me. Uncle, your days of worrying and sacrifice are over. Linda, I know you love business, so I've opened a shopping mall for you. It's not small scale anymore. It's an international standard business. I've already employed staff to work for you. And, Linda, I want you to go back to school on a part-time program. It's time to fulfill your own dreams." Linda gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Laura, all this, for me?" Laura nodded firmly. "Yes, you deserve it and so much more." She turned back to Geoffrey. "Uncle, no, Father, I've repurchased the lands you sold for my education, and construction is already underway. And there's more. In the city, a school building project is being completed in your name. As a retired teacher, I want you to return to the life you love so much. You'll run the school, inspire young minds, and leave a legacy." Overwhelmed with emotion, Geoffrey embraced Laura and Linda. The three of them held each other tightly, their hearts full of gratitude and joy. That night, they celebrated not only Laura's achievements, but the new chapter in their lives, a chapter filled with hope, love, and boundless opportunities. Now living in the city, Laura was thriving as a medical doctor at Livewell International Hospital, one of the most prestigious healthcare centers in the region. Linda, on the other hand, had become a well-known businesswoman, owning Linda Shopping Mall, the second largest mall in the city. Meanwhile, Geoffrey was running Geoffrey Montessori Secondary School, a British standard school, gaining admiration and respect from the community for his dedication to education. One evening, Laura returned home from work, visibly exhausted. She dropped her bag on the couch and slumped into a seat beside Linda, who was reviewing some business reports. Laura let out a tired sigh and said, "Linda, I think we need to hire a house help. Aside from the cook, we need someone to handle the cleaning, washing, and other chores around here. We're all so busy, and it's time we plan for a little comfort." Linda looked up from her work and nodded in agreement. "That's a great idea. I was just thinking the same thing. I'll ask my friends if they know someone trustworthy. We need someone reliable and honest." As the two sisters were discussing, Geoffrey walked in, looking cheerful and full of energy. The sisters immediately stood up, rushing to greet him. "Welcome, Dad. How is your day?" Linda asked, wrapping her arms around him. Geoffrey chuckled warmly, his face lighting up with joy. "Thank you, my daughters. My day was wonderful. I have so much to tell you about it, but first, let me freshen up." "All right, Dad," Laura said, smiling. "We'll be waiting to hear all about it." The house was filled with warmth and laughter as they settled in for another evening of family bonding. A few months later, Madam J, the cleaner, was busy tidying up the sitting room when Linda walked in, dressed and ready for work. Noticing Madam J's diligent cleaning, Linda said, "Good morning, Madam J. I need a favor. My room is looking quite untidy, and I've just bought a new wardrobe that should be able to hold all my clothes. Could you please transfer everything from the old wardrobe to the new one? Make sure it's perfectly organized." Madam J stopped what she was doing and looked up with a nod. "Yes, ma'am. I'll take care of it. It will be done before you return from work." Linda smiled, satisfied with her response. "Thank you. I trust you to do a good job. See you later." After finishing her usual chores, Madam J entered Linda's room to organize it as instructed. She began transferring Linda's clothes from the old wardrobe to the new one, humming softly to herself. As she worked, her hand brushed against something hard beneath the pile of clothes. Curious, she pulled out a neatly tucked blue file that had been hidden beneath the layers. For a moment, she hesitated, then quickly placed the file under the clothes in the new wardrobe and resumed her work. But the discovery of the file lingered in her mind, distracting her from her task. What could be in it? Why was it hidden there? Separated from other files, she thought, shaking her head as if to dismiss the curiosity. Yet, the more she tried to ignore it, the stronger the urge grew. Unable to resist any longer, she paused and carefully retrieved the file from its hiding spot. With trembling hands, she opened it and found a folded letter inside. As she unfolded the paper and began to read, her heart skipped a beat. It was the same letter that had been placed on Linda and Laura's luggage the day they were abandoned in the bush. The words hit her like a thunderbolt.
Laura and Linda. By the time you are reading this letter, you must have been far from the place you called home. We are not your biological parents. You were abandoned in a taxi as newborns and brought to a daycare. We adopted you, but can no longer keep you. This is goodbye. Your fake mom.
Madam J's eyes widened as she processed the information. Her thoughts raced. Abandoned as newborns. Taken to a daycare. Adopted by a couple. She rubbed her forehead, trying to connect the dots. How old are these twins now? Could it be them? The realization sent a chill down her spine. She folded the letter carefully, placed it back in the file, and returned it to its hidden spot. Although she resumed her work, her mind was clouded by the discovery. The letter's contents haunted her, leaving her deeply unsettled. "I need to know the truth," she thought to herself, vowing to investigate further when the opportunity arose. That evening, Laura returned home looking deeply troubled. Linda, noticing her sister's distressed expression, immediately asked, "Laura, I hope everything is okay. Why do you look so upset?" Laura sighed heavily as she sank into the couch. One of the hospital's gatemen, who has always been so kind to me, was rushed into the intensive care unit today. He's gravely ill. It turns out he has severe kidney problems and urgently needs a kidney transplant. Linda gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. "Oh no, that's terrible. What about his family? Can they help?" Shaking her head, Laura replied, "It seems he doesn't have any family. The hospital found out he's been living alone, with no trace of relatives to contact. It's heartbreaking. He's such a kind man, and I don't know how to help him." The sisters sat in silence, their hearts heavy with the news, when Madam J walked into the room, carrying a folded piece of paper in her hand. Clearing her throat, she said, "Excuse me, I found this paper in the laundry while washing clothes today. I don't know if it's important, but I thought I should give it to you, Ma." Laura took the paper, barely glancing at it before handing it over to Linda. "This looks like a photocopy of that letter," she said softly. Linda unfolded the paper, and as her eyes scanned the familiar words, both sisters shook their heads in unison. Memories of their painful past came flooding back, yet they couldn't help but feel gratitude for how far they had come. Seeing their reaction, Madam J hesitated for a moment before asking cautiously, "Was that letter addressed to you too?" Linda nodded, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Yes, it was, but we thank God for where we are today. That chapter of our lives is behind us." Madam J's eyes narrowed as she studied the sisters. A wave of sadness washed over her as she turned and left the room quietly, her heart heavy with the burden of the discovery. Geoffrey returned home from work that evening with a bright smile lighting up his face. Laura and Linda immediately noticed his cheerful mood. "Dad," Laura asked with a curious grin, "did that woman visit your office again today?" Geoffrey chuckled and nodded, his expression giving nothing away. Linda quickly chimed in, "I knew it. So, has she finally agreed to marry you?" Geoffrey's smile faded slightly as he frowned thoughtfully. "Do you really think I should go through this all over again? I don't want to bring anyone into our lives who might cause you trouble or disrupt the harmony we've built." Laura leaned forward, her tone gentle but firm. "Dad, we've told you before, you deserve to start a new chapter in your life. You've sacrificed so much for us. Very soon, both of us will get married and start our own families. It wouldn't be fair for you to be left alone. You need someone to keep you company and make you happy." Linda nodded in agreement. "Laura's right, Dad. You've done everything for us. It's time to focus on your own happiness." Geoffrey sighed, his eyes softening as he looked at his daughters. "All right, you've made your point, but before I take any big steps, I'll invite her over to the house. If you both approve of her, then I'll consider proposing." Laura and Linda exchanged excited glances, both eager to meet the woman who had brought their father so much joy. "That sounds like a good plan, Dad," Laura said with a smile. "Yes," Linda added, "we trust your judgment, but we would love to meet her first." Geoffrey's smile returned, filled with a mix of excitement and nerves. "Thank you, my daughters. Your approval means everything to me." 8 months after Geoffrey's second marriage, Madam J was busy cleaning the sitting room when silent tears began streaming down her face. Linda, already dressed for work, noticed her distress and paused, concern evident on her face. "Madam J, are you crying?" Linda asked gently. Madam J quickly wiped her face and shook her head. "No, I'm not crying," she replied, her voice betraying her emotions. Linda moved closer, her voice soft and reassuring. "Please, don't hide your feelings from me. If there's something you need or if you're facing a problem, talk to me. I promise I'll do everything I can to help." Madam J hesitated, her hands trembling slightly. "It's not something easy to talk about," she murmured. "It's very complicated." Linda nodded, her tone encouraging. "I'm all ears. Take your time, but go ahead and share. Sometimes talking about it helps." Taking a deep breath, Madam J began, her voice trembling with pain and regret. 26 years ago, when I was pregnant, my husband made it painfully clear that he would only accept a male child. He told me outright that if I gave birth to a girl, I shouldn't bother coming back home. I was terrified, confused, and heartbroken. She paused, her tears flowing freely now. "Then, I did something terrible, something I've regretted every single day of my life. The past is haunting me, and I don't know how to live with it anymore." Linda's expression softened into one of concern and curiosity. "Madam J, please, tell me everything," she urged gently. "What happened after that? What did you do?" Before Madam J could respond, Linda's phone buzzed, breaking the moment. She glanced at the screen and sighed. "I'm sorry, I need to take this," she said apologetically before answering the call. "Hello, ma'am," came a voice on the other end. "Mr. Smith has arrived at the office. He's waiting to discuss the contract his company wants to award to us." Linda nodded briskly, her tone shifting to a professional one. "Thank you, I'm on my way," she said, ending the call. Turning back to Madam J, she grabbed her bag and smiled apologetically. "I'm sorry, Madam J, I have to go now. This is an important meeting for my company. But I promise, as soon as I return, we'll sit down and talk. I want to hear everything," Linda said sincerely. Madam J nodded, though her face was still clouded with emotion. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice heavy with sorrow and gratitude. Linda gave her a reassuring pat on the shoulder before hurrying out the door. As Madam J stood alone in the room, she wiped her tears, wondering if she would ever have the courage to reveal the full truth and finally face the consequences of her actions. 2 nights later, Laura arrived home earlier than Linda and was taken aback to find Madam J on the couch in the sitting room. Her surprise quickly turned to irritation as she frowned and said sternly, "Madam J, why are you here? You know how much I dislike this. You have a comfortable mattress in your room. Why would you choose to lie here?" She walked closer, expecting a response, but Madam J remained motionless. Laura's annoyance turned to concern. She leaned over and gently touched Madam J, trying to rouse her. To her shock, she realized that Madam J's breathing was faint and irregular. Alarmed, Laura called out loudly, "Chef, chef, please come quickly." Moments later, the chef rushed into the room, his face filled with confusion. Laura pointed at Madam J. "Something's wrong with her. She's barely breathing." The chef gasped and quickly called for the gateman to assist. Together, they carefully lifted Madam J and carried her to Laura's car. Laura's hands trembled as she got into the driver's seat, her heart racing with fear. Without wasting another moment, she sped towards the hospital, her mind racing with worrying and prayers for Madam J's recovery. As they arrived, medical staff quickly rushed Madam J into the intensive care unit, recognizing the severity of her condition. Laura stood in the hallway, pacing back and forth, her thoughts swirling. She couldn't shake the guilt for her earlier irritation. What if I had been kinder? What if I had checked on her sooner? She thought to herself. 2 days later, Madam J, still in the hospital, but now conscious, lay quietly in her bed. As she turned her head to glance at the patient on the bed beside hers, she froze. There was something familiar about him. Squinting for a better look, her heart skipped a beat. "Augustine, is that you?" she asked, her voice trembling with shock. The elderly man, frail and visibly unwell, slowly turned his head to face her. He squinted, recognition flashing in his tired eyes. "Ah, Justina," he whispered, his voice weak but full of emotion. "It's me. I am the one. I'm sorry for what I did to you." Before Madam J could respond, the door opened and Laura and Linda entered the ward, carrying a small bag of fruits and a thermos. They paused, surprised to see the two talking. Seeing the emotional exchange between Madam J and the man, Laura broke the silence. "Do you two know each other?" she asked, her tone laced with curiosity. Augustine gave a faint nod. "Yes," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She was my first wife." Linda and Laura exchanged shocked glances, their voices rising in unison. "First wife." Augustine nodded again, a shadow of regret crossing his face. "Yes, Justina and I were married many years ago." Madam J's face hardened slightly, her hands fidgeting with the edges of her hospital blanket. "You didn't just leave me, Augustine," she said, her tone firm but emotional. "You abandoned me and forced me to make decisions I've regretted every day since." The room fell silent, tension thick in the air. Linda and Laura looked at each other, their minds racing with questions. Madam J broke the heavy silence, her voice trembling with emotion. Laura, Linda, she began, her eyes welling up with tears. I need a favor from you both. Laura and Linda leaned in closer, their hearts pounding with anticipation. Madam J continued, please, collect DNA samples from both Augustine and me. There's a chance. We might be your biological parents. The words hit Laura and Linda like a thunderbolt. Their eyes widened in shock, and they instinctively grabbed each other's hands for support. Our parents, they chorused, their voices a mixture of disbelief and confusion.
Stay tuned for part 2.
More interesting stories to watch on this channel are:
She suddenly went into labor, and this happened.
The Hawker.
She's too white to be my son's wife. Get the links in the description below.
Thanks so much for watching. God bless you. I love you all.